Senator Hagerty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assistant Secretary Nichols, it's good to see you again. During your nomination hearing in May, you committed to working with me and this committee to curb illegal immigration and to address the root causes of this ongoing border crisis. I want to first ask you just a couple of basic questions. Yes or no answers will be fine. First, do you agree that to solve the border crisis, the United States needs policies and diplomatic agreements to discourage illegal immigration?
Yes.
And my second question, do you agree that making it easier to cross the border and remain in the United States tends to encourage people to come here illegally, all else being equal?
We should encourage orderly legal migration while combating irregular migration.
I agree with you on that. In May of 2021, I traveled to Guatemala and Mexico to meet with government officials about long-term strategies to address the border crisis. These officials told me that the key root cause of the crisis is that the Biden administration is sending a message that if you cross the border right now, you'll be allowed to stay in the United States. This message is being sent because the Biden administration canceled common sense policies like the migrant protection protocols, the Remain in Mexico policy, policies and diplomatic agreements with Mexico that were hard negotiated by the previous administration. These policies required that persons crossing the border from Mexico and seeking asylum in the United States rather should remain in Mexico and not be released into the United States while their asylum claims are being adjudicated. This policy made sense to me, I think to many others. We shouldn't allow people who don't have valid asylum claims to enter the United States for any period of time. And if a migrant knows that simply by crossing the border, he or she can achieve indefinite release into the United States, often for years before their asylum claim is heard, or permanently if they simply decide not to show up, then that's an enormous incentive to cross the border right now. Yet despite court orders to the contrary, the Biden administration is still trying to terminate these policies and these diplomatic agreements that were so hard fought. So, Ambassador Nichols, why, in the face of record illegal immigration, is the Biden administration terminating policies and diplomatic agreements that would otherwise serve to reduce migrants' incentive to illegally cross the border?
The migrant protection protocols is subject to ongoing litigation. The administration is committed to following the law and court orders. I can't get into this in greater detail due to that ongoing litigation, but I will note that our cooperation with Mexico on the full range of migration issues is excellent. The first trip that I took was to Haiti, and among other things, I talked to the Prime Minister about migration issues. I accompanied Secretary Blinken to Colombia, where we had a regional migration conference to address illegal, irregular migration, to deal with issues related to the root causes, to promote regular migration, to attack trafficking networks, and we're committed to following up and pushing on these issues every day.
I've got it. I appreciate the meetings and the conferences, but I'll note this. The Biden administration is actually trying to undo these diplomatic agreements that were put in place and were working. I think it's very simple. Obey the law. That's what the Fifth Circuit has suggested. That's the proper answer here. Ambassador Robinson, I'd like to turn to you, if I might. The fentanyl problem that's plaguing the United States is getting worse. We've talked about this, Senator Shaheen, Senator Portman. In Tennessee, overdose rates for individuals who are aged 25 to 34 have skyrocketed from 4.8 per 100,000 in 2015 to 37.6 per 100,000 in 2019. And every time I am home, I hear from local sheriffs that it's gotten much worse this year. The Memphis Commercial Appeal, our large newspaper in our state, a few days ago interviewed Tennessee's former opioid czar, and he said, I quote, "I can't remember the last time I've looked at a drug screening of a new patient coming off the street that didn't have fentanyl in it." Mexico is the major transit and production point for fentanyl, the fentanyl that's coming from China before it enters the United States. While direct shipments of finished fentanyl from China to the U.S. have declined after the Trump administration's crackdown, the amount of fentanyl shipped from Mexico has increased dramatically. And I've been told that more than 90% of that fentanyl crossing the border, or at least the chemicals that are used to make it, the precursors, comes from China. I mean, these drugs are killing Americans. Assistant Secretary Robinson, what percentage of the fentanyl coming across our border ultimately originates in China, including the precursor chemicals?
I would say a great percentage. I don't have a specific number, but I would say a great percentage comes from China.
Well, I'll ask both Ambassador Nichols and Ambassador Robbins if you would commit to putting together an estimate for me and for this committee, how much of this fentanyl coming from China, what percentage of it is coming from China, whether it's precursor or actual fentanyl, coming across the border into America annually, and how much of it specifically can be traced to China? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Van Hollen.